Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Donor Centric Approach. This podcast is brought to you by MRP Donor Development, where we keep our donors at the center of everything we do, and by our friends and sponsors at Stellar Web Systems, the nonprofit tech solution. As always, I am your host, Orlando Barros, and we have a special episode for you today. We're going to be diving into one of the most talked about topics in fundraising, and that is storytelling, and why storytelling in itself often doesn't work the way that we hope it should. And the truth is that we all know that storytelling matters. This is why we continuously talk about it in fundraising and development. We've heard this all the time. Facts tell, and stories sell. If you've ever shared a story in a donor email or at an event and been met with silence, an awkward response from your donor, or worse, no follow-up gift at all, you are not alone. And that's why we have this episode for you in store today. Today's episode is about helping you fix the issue of storytelling the wrong way. We're going to be sharing 3 reasons why stories fail to connect with donors. We're going to be sharing a simple and actionable storytelling framework that you can start using right away. And 3 quick ways to strengthen the stories that you are already telling in your mission. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what happens when stories don't land? What happens when you have a powerful story that does not get the reaction that you are expecting? What's going wrong? I've worked with a lot of nonprofit leaders, executive directors, and development directors, from founders all the way to your regular development coordinator. And they'll often tell me, Orlando, we're telling stories. We highlight a person in need. We share an update, but we just don't seem to see people be moved by what we're saying. And that's ultimately what you want, right? And if that's happening to you, here's why. Sometimes the story that we're telling is too vague, and you want to avoid that. Sometimes we say things like, hey, we serve low-income families, or we support Christian organizations around the world, or we help to feed the hungry. When you say things like that, even though it is what you're doing, it doesn't quite come across as clear for the donor or the audience. And you've heard me say this often: clarity creates unity. And what you want to create is unity between you and the donor's mind, between what the donor is thinking and what you are thinking, right? So when your stories are too vague, they just don't create a clear picture in your donor's eyes. Sometimes we go the opposite way, and maybe we're saying too much and we're making our story too complex. Sometimes maybe we give too much detail, too much background, too many acronyms that sometimes are just only useful in our industry, or too many layers of explanation. And you lose the donor. Oftentimes when we do this, we lose the donor before we even get to the point, before we even get to why this story is important, let alone even getting to the point of an ask or a further invitation. And when we don't do one of those things, when the story is not too vague or the story is not too complex, what we end up doing is that the story is too distant from the donor. We don't make our stories relatable to the audience. It doesn't bring the donor into the moment. It doesn't bring the donor into the actual story. And they don't see themselves in the narrative. On the last two episodes that we've had on this podcast, we've heard both from Jessica Root at House of Mercy and Peter Levesque at Xavier Mission Fund. Jessica talked about trying to make the work of food relief feel real to donors who might never or have never gone hungry themselves. Peter Levesque shared how hard it is sometimes to communicate the impact of actually doing the administrative support of new missions land with his donors. They both know their work is powerful, but telling the story well in a way that resonates with their donors, that's where the challenge is. And we talked about really great solutions during our episode. So if you haven't heard those two episodes, I do recommend that you go back and you listen to them. And one of the ways that we talk about how to share stories in a powerful way with your donors and with your audience is to use a framework that actually works. So what do you do? How do you make it simple? I want to recommend using a storytelling structure that makes it easy for the donor, for your audience to connect emotionally with what you're trying to say. We call this method or this framework people, pivot, purpose. People, pivot, purpose. So let's break that down a little bit further for you. People. Let's start with one real person. Let's forget stats. Let's forget numbers. When it comes down to actually telling the story of your mission, and you get to the single person, numbers don't matter as much. So forget stats. Forget the community that you're creating and start with one person. Narrow it down to one individual. Instead of saying something along the lines of, we served 20,000 people last year. Great stuff. Doesn't quite connect. Instead of that, try saying something like, meet Jane. Jane is a mom of 3 who came to our mission and encountered our ministry with nothing but a grocery bag, with nothing but a backpack. When you start by setting up the story that way, it gives your audience a face of an actual person, not just a figure. You tell one person's story and you allow that person to stand in for the many, for the other tens of thousands of people that your ministry, your mission is reaching and affecting and whose lives are being changed. Start with one story. That's people. Then you pivot and then you want to highlight the moment of transformation for that person. What changed? If Jane came to you in need, what happened? Did they get a job by coming to your mission? Did they get a hot meal? Did they get a place to sleep? How are they different now? And you do that well by painting the before and the after very clearly. Let's go back to Jane. Jane came in and she was broken. Jane was unsure if she could even keep going. And she left with hope. And she left with the phone number or the email information of another one of the people who were affected by our mission, another mom, another person that had just been recently in her shoes. What you're doing by making that pivot, by highlighting the before and the after clearly, is that you are allowing your donor to see their support, their generosity at work. And that's the moment that the donor goes, oh, your mission is important. And then you go to purpose. People, pivot, and now purpose. And purpose shows the donor their role in the story. This is how you make it relatable to them, right? And you can make it nice and easy by saying this very line. This happened because of you. Because of you, Jane now has hope. Because of you, Jane now believes that she can indeed keep going. Your support is pivotal. That's a transformation. It doesn't happen without the donor support. That plants the seed for a deeper invitation. It's more than just an encouragement. It's a sign that their gift made a real, impactful human difference in an actual person's life. You can use language like, because of generous supporters like you. This is what a partnership with our mission looks like. Jane's story is the kind of story that your support makes possible. Doesn't that sound like it makes you want to give more? And that's the goal. Because when the donors see themselves in the story, they're going to remember it. It's going to stick with them. But even beyond that, it's going to make them want to act. When you use this simple process of people, pivot, purpose, what you end up doing is getting the donor to commit before you even make the ask. And isn't that what you want out of your stories? And I know if you're listening to this podcast, I know that your mission has hundreds of these stories. So many stories of people that have come in need and they have left feeling renewed, like a complete different person. On top of that, I'm going to give you just 3 bonus ways to make your stories even stronger this very week. Right now. The first one, if you're able and when possible, use real names and use real pictures. Obviously, yes, get permission. Right? We want to respect the dignity of every person and respect privacy. But the point is that the more tangible, the more granular, the better. It's going to make your story. You want donors to connect with an actual person. You want them to see in the story. You want them to think that could have been me. Another way to make your story stronger, connect your stories to your calendar, to your annual campaign. So link stories to events that you put together, to festivities that you put together, to maybe holidays, to campaigns. If you are a Christian or a Catholic organization, use a church's calendar or feast days and connect them to your stories. Donors give more when the story fits a season or when the story fits a reason. So if you put together a drive or a monthly donor drive or a match appeal, use that. We did this, we raised the money here, and here's what happened, right? Connect your stories with your mission's calendar, with your organization's calendar. And lastly, bring people behind the scenes. And I cannot stress this enough if you have a physical office or a physical organization. Invite donors to come visit, to see and to witness how the sausage gets made in your organization. If you can do that, send a voice memo from a client of yours or someone who benefited from your mission, or record a short video saying, Here's where I was before. And if it wasn't for your organization, I would not be here. And I know that wouldn't have happened without your support. So thank you. The point is to allow the donor to see the behind the scenes, to see the real work that you do in action. And that work is possible because of their support. Does that make sense? Now, let's talk about more action steps that you can actually do this week that can have an even greater impact for your organization today. These are nice and easy, and you can implement them right away. The first one is I want you to, if possible, I want you to audit a recent donor communication. So perhaps grab your last email appeal or your last newsletter or the last update that you sent to your donors and ask yourself, is there a real person at the center of this story? Is there a clear before and after moment where the reader, the donor, the audience can see the transformation in place? And did I make it obvious to the donor how this was possible because of them? People, pivot, purpose. If your last donor communication didn't meet that criteria, then rewrite it. Or tell a new story using this framework, people, pivot, purpose. Take a testimonial or a story from one of your recent wins in your mission and rework it using this new framework. Make it about one person, one individual, and describe the turning point clearly for the donor. And then anchor it in the impact the donor has made. Your gift of $1,000 allowed us to do this. Your monthly donation of $100 a month made this possible. If you have not done so already, I say this a lot, create a story bank or a vault where you can keep all stories. So if you haven't done this recently, if I were in your shoes, I would block out 30 minutes in the next couple of days to collect 3 to 5 stories from your team, from your program staff, or from your volunteers. And then for the next 3 to 4 weeks, do that every week for 30 minutes a week. And when you're putting these stories together, as you're creating this spreadsheet or this vault or this folder, use a template again as you're putting them together. Who's the person? What changed? And how did your donors help? If you do that ahead of time, I'm telling you, you're going to thank yourself later when you need content for your next appeal, for your next campaign, for your next donor communication. If possible, also want to encourage you to test it live. Based on this new framework, use your rewritten story in your next donor call, in your next donor visit, or your next Zoom one-on-one, or maybe even your next board meeting, or the next update you give to your team. And I want you, when you do this, I want you to pay attention to how people respond, how your donor responds, how your team responds, how your board responds. Do they lean in to hear the story? Are they asking questions? Do they seem engaged? And if so, that's how you know you're on the right track. That's how you know that you're telling the story the right way. Make storytelling a habit. Remember, facts tell and stories sell. So add at least a 10-minute block to your weekly calendar to collect or review stories. It's going to do a whole lot more for your fundraising and development than any one-time appeal. You can create an appeal that's going to bring whatever, 10, 20, 50, 30, 60, $75,000 for one appeal. One story told well in a powerful manner puts the donor in the story can bring a whole lot more from one person. So making it a habit is worth the effort. It does pay off. At the end of the day, you know this. Fundraising is not simply about the numbers, and it's not simply about the programs that you do. Your mission, or part of your mission, it's about connection, both with the people that you serve, but also the people that make that service possible, aka your donors. Fundraising and development is about letting donors see and feel what their generous support, what their hard-earned money makes possible when they invested in you, when they invested in your organization. So the next time you sit down to tell a story, remember, people, pivot, purpose. And watch how your donors, watch how your audience responds to that. Watch how the next appeal does. Watch how the next email blast does. This works. And your mission is worth you making this change. If you have found what I just said helpful, if you found these episodes of the Donor Centric Approach encouraging, I would love it if you shared it with a colleague or left a quick review. It really helped us reach more mission-driven leaders like you. And it's just such an honor that you would do something like that. As always, if ever you want help clarifying your message or building out your fundraising and development strategy, I would encourage you. It would mean the world to us if you just reached out. I would love to connect with you. If you go to our website, MRP Donor Development, MRPDonorDev.com. You can use a contact us form, or Calendly link is right there. Just simply click on the Calendly link for my availability and you'll be able to sit down with me. I would love to do that for you. As always, it is such an honor to walk this out with you and to accompany you as you make your fundraising and development efforts better each and every day. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening to us. Keep your donors at the center of everything that you do, and you will see results. See you next time here on the Donor Centric Approach. God bless.